Hello, everyone. Welcome to WebViewer Integrations. This is an advanced class. It says it's advanced, but I was sort of a beginner at this when I started, so it's really kind of a beginner to advanced class. So I hope you'll get something out of it. My name is Jeremy Brown, and if you've been to DevCon many years, you're probably wondering, who is this guy up on stage? That's a good question. It's valid. It's my first time speaking here at DevCon. But I am a teacher. I've taught for a long time. I'm a FileMaker developer, and I'm a human being, pretty much in that order. Sometimes the top two supersede the bottom one there. I taught for 15 years in grades 2nd through 7th grade. Thank you. Taught mostly math. I enjoyed it so much. But when I got into FileMaker, I decided I liked that better. So, because I'm a teacher, today during my session, if you have to go to the bathroom, I have hall passes for you, okay? So, 3 people out at one time, and you need to come up here and get them, all right? And sign out at the back door as well. So, let's see, FileMaker developer. I started about 2008 when I stumbled into it. That's how I like to phrase it. How many of you stumbled into FileMaker? Yeah, whoa, vast majority. You kind of just woke up one day and suddenly you either opened the app or someone said, learn this now, right? So I stumbled into FileMaker. I built the school information system and really enjoyed doing that. We're making it exactly what the teachers needed because I was a teacher and I needed it to perform a certain way. Joined Soliant Consulting in 2014 and I'm certified 12 through 16. So that's great. I did my certification on 4th of July. So that was wonderful. And I'm a human being. I like video games. I'm 40 years old, 42 now, I guess, so video games kind of get the back seat, but love these games. I love JavaScript, learning that. Got a dog, live in Colorado, and that's a glacier there in the middle of the summer up there, so it's beautiful, love that. So that is a little bit about me. This session is all about working with the WebViewer, an amazing object that is sort of a little kind of tucked up there in the toolbar next to the charting tool, I think, and it seems unassuming, but it's powerful because the web space is filled with so many powerful interactions and libraries, and so we're going to focus on that today. We're going to take a look at how to, the best practices of bringing in an integration from the web space into our FileMaker custom apps. We're going to take a look at how to manipulate it, how to manipulate the integration to fit our needs for our custom app, and how to implement these integrations into any. So I'll show you in a minute, but the library I built is helpful for that. And we're going to talk about how to call back to FileMaker using the FMP protocol if you've never used it. But most importantly for me, it's really excited about getting excited about an integration. I love using the cool things that we can do in the web in FileMaker. The subtitle of my library is called Building Deeper Functionality into FileMaker, stuff that's just not there yet, and, but stuff that is good for our clients or for our custom apps. So these are the objectives, and I'm really excited about sharing this with you. The library that I built, this is a sample file of it, and if you've downloaded it, that's great. The library I built just came as a result of me being, number one, I was kind of bored, and there's a lot of stuff to learn in FileMaker. I still don't know much about SSL certificates or AWS or ODBC or thousands of other things, but this was fun to really spend a lot of time on. Many years ago in the community, on the community side, I asked this question, what can you do with the WebViewer? I got a lot of great responses, and so I decided, when I had some downtime at work, to explore it and to spend time working with it. I'm certainly not the first person to work with the WebViewer. This was released in 8.5, FileMaker 8.5. So I'm a couple versions behind, but it's exciting, and I'm excited to share that with you in the form of this library. I also had 2 objectives in mind as I was building this library. And we're going to focus on the library here, but we're also going to extend those concepts so that you can do this without using of any of the library integrations that I have and find your own. But my two objectives were to standardize the implementation. I have been working with the library a few times, or with the web viewer a few times, but it was kind of haphazard, and I just picked up random methods here and there, and I decided to just focus my energies on making it standardized. Finding those best practices that are good for as many different parts of the platform as possible, and as many different scenarios, offline, online, and so forth. And my other goal was to make it easy to implement into any custom app. So we're going to get into that and take a look at that today. Quick question, how many of you have a lot of experience with the web viewer? Just curious. Okay, there's a few hands. How many of you have no experience with the web viewer? How many of you have some? All right, good. So I hope to be able to bring some best practices that actually colleagues at Soliant and I have kind of uncovered and explored from other people as well. You know, though, I just realized it's 2:15 and it's I'm kind of getting tired. So I like to do some stretching here before we get started. So if everybody would take one of your arms and stretch it out in front of you. Don't hit the person in front of you. All right, let's do that. And then turn it face down, or your thumb down, okay? Take your other arm and stretch it over, like that. Come on, everybody needs to do it, even in the back. Come on, you can't get away from me. There you go, all right, so now take this and then simply twist up. No? Okay, all right, well. So I want to start with some questions, actually. We're going to reverse it a little bit. You've had some experience with web viewer or none. You've seen the demo probably. I'm interested in what you want to talk about here. Definitely I have a PowerPoint here, or a keynote, sorry, and I know what I'm going to talk about, but I want to make sure that I answer your questions. So if you would step up here, Clay, do you want him to be in the middle? All right, so if you have a question or a thought, what do you want to know more about this file, about integrations in particular, anything in general about integrations? Does anybody have any questions? Just shout them out if you want, and I'll repeat them. Nothing at the moment? Yes, sir. Using the date picker on Go? Yeah. Okay, I repeated it, Clay, thank you. All right, so we'll take a look and see if that works. What else? Yes? Charting, yes. Big time needs for us in FileMaker is to do some charting. So we'll take a look at some of those and specifically how to set them up. Anything else? Clear in the back. Charting, yes. Can I get an amen for charting? Yeah. All right. Yes, sir. Sending data to the web viewer without reloading? Interesting, okay. All right. See about that? Yes. Data manipulation and reporting. Okay, very good. All right, so I think I can cover some of those. Yes? Okay, data extraction from a web page. All right. Stocks, okay. Galleries, photos, like you saw up there. I'll point that out, okay. So it sounds like we're doing some specifics here. One here, one there, yes? Navigation or dashboards, okay, I think I could talk about those. Web Direct, good question. I'll bring that up. What can you do with a web viewer that you can't do in FileMaker? The answer is a lot, but we'll look at some specifics. All right. If I didn't get your questions because I can't see, just feel free to shout them out during the time, and we'll save time for questions at the end. So, to your point there over there. There's a ton of things that you can do in the web space. There are JavaScript and jQuery libraries out there that can just do about anything, and it's amazing what you can see. You can create video games in a browser, and you could potentially bring that into FileMaker. But what we have to do as developers right at the beginning is decide what is useful to us in FileMaker for our clients for the particular needs. I love using the web viewer, but I would never just do it because I love doing it. I would do it because it only fits a client's need or a particular use case. In my experience, in my workings, I found some kind of categories of JavaScript libraries that I've brought into my demo here that I feel are pretty useful, and I would say that 90% of them are pretty useful in FileMaker. And I've actually started to use them here and there. Built a dashboard for a client using just JavaScript and a couple libraries. And I built a photo album for a school one time. So there's a lot of potential, but we just have to obviously be careful about it. Talk about using these integrations. There's a lot of great things. I can't say this enough. I love them so much. There are some great pros for it. You get some deeper functionality. I'm not going to say better. I'm going to say deeper because, yeah, that's just what it is. It's deeper. It's more, in some cases, it's more rich. Sometimes you get a nice, sleeker look. This looks pretty nice and modern using some great modern CSS libraries. You get a nice interactive experience with the data, with charts. You know, you've got charts that you can click on a bar and the rest will disappear. It's beautiful stuff that we can do in a library. And this last one is something that my friend Josh and we just remembered. He just prompted me to remember this. But once the data is loaded into a library, it's incredibly fast. Charts render incredibly fast. I have a demo here that has 40,000 records in it, and it loads in a second because the data is loaded and it's ready to go. JavaScript can process it incredibly fast. So those are the great advantages of using a web viewer, using an integration. But there are some definite cons. There are other technologies involved. It's not just FileMaker. If you stumbled into FileMaker like I did, you're going to start stumbling into the HTML, CSS, JavaScript if you've not already come from that area. There is a possible cost in development time. It could potentially take longer to implement one of these. I think I've tried to work it out in my library so that that's no longer a factor, but we'll see. And as you use it, hopefully that is the case. But that's definitely a real thing. It works best in FileMaker Pro, FileMaker Go, WebDirect. We had some issues, like right before I pushed it out there on our Soliant blog page, I suddenly realized it doesn't work in WebDirect, and that freaked me out a little bit. But a colleague and I, we kind of figured out a possibility. He wrote a blog post about it, and I'll explain that in a bit. And just the basic behavior of the web viewer, there's some weird things that go on with it, like in Windows, if you try to print a layout with the web viewer on it, it's blurry, and it's always white in the background, so you can't, and it always renders on top of things. You can't stack objects like you might, and maybe you could hide it, but there's just some behavior about the web viewer. So hopefully we can work together in eliminating some of these cons, but it is something to think about. Basically, we just have to be deliberate about the choice we make as developers. We can't just pick the method because we love it. We can't pick the web viewer thing because it's cool, it's exciting. We have to pick it. We have to make a deliberate choice. Here's an example. In FileMaker, we can all build list views that are great. They work for our clients. We could even, in the header up there, we could even possibly build some sorting and so forth. And that works just fine. For 90% of our clients, that's probably going to work fine. But if suddenly there's some extra needs for other functionality, we can maybe take a look at a web viewer. And I found one here. It's in the demo that does a lot of things that's built in. Things that we couldn't do, we would have to build separately in FileMaker, is in one library. So here we can limit the entry view right there. We can have some pagination going on. We can do some sorting by columns and a built-in search. Over there, I could type in CEO space Texas and get all the CEOs in Texas, and it's in an instant. So once the data is loaded, that's the key, and we'll talk about that in a bit. It's built in, the functionality is there. So you just need to be deliberate about the choice you make. Again, I love working with them. Wish I could do it all the time, but I realize that that's not my job. My job is to pick the best technique for the particular circumstance. As I was working through this and as I've started to work with this in real client files, I've learned a lot of lessons. It does take time to push an integration because each custom app is unique, each circumstance is unique, each part of where an integration is going to go in a custom app is unique. So you just need to know that it's going to take time. There are definitely some trade-offs. You have to focus on not on FileMaker scripting, but not only on FileMaker scripting, but also on JavaScript and HTML and so forth. But we also know that users really like the interaction, the interactive experience of using something that's cool that you can drag, drop, and sort and see cool animations and stuff. So good lessons learned. None of these has put me off, but again, I just come back to the idea you've got to make a deliberate choice. So we're going to dive in and explore, and we're going to look at these 5 topics, and we're going to kind of go back and forth between the keynote and the actual file. If you've downloaded the file, any version of the file, there's like 3 out there now, feel free to follow along. I am going to go kind of fast because we have less than an hour, but feel free to follow along, and we can stop and we can ask questions along the way. We're going to talk about how an integration can be standardized inside FileMaker, talk about the data gathering process, which it's vital for most of these, talking about how to manipulate an integration, and I'm going to demo all of these as well, so that, especially the last one, pushing an integration. So if I have an integration in this library that I want to push into my own custom app, I want to do that in real time and see how well it goes. So you can use that as an example. And then, of course, extending this concept, show you some things that didn't quite fit this model that are just taking this concept and expanding it out. First one is standardization. JavaScript libraries, the integrations that I found on the internet follow the same rules that every web page is developed. We have an index.html page. We have one or many CSS files. We have one or many JavaScript files. And I am duplicating that idea in FileMaker. So in my demo, every field that you see up there, the expanded view, I'll show you in a minute, is filled with the actual library code that I downloaded off the internet. And just a word about that, I only used free ones here. HighCharts is a very popular one with us developers. Didn't use it because it does cost, and I don't want you to have that and think you can just use it for free. But all the other ones are free to use. So we've set this up as a web page. You can see I've got an HTML file right there. I don't actually know how this works. Got an HTML file or field here, and I've got some CSS and some JavaScript. And in my case, I also have some data fields because I decided to keep the data out of the actual libraries and so forth, and in the code, and have it in a separate field so that I could easily get to it and manipulate it and then rerun it and reset it, refresh it. So that's how it's set up. And we'll just go into that and take a look. So here's the actual file. So I have, on the community, I have a demo version of this. It's just got about 10 of these integrations. But there's also a link with the word here on it that you can go to our site at Soliant Consulting and download the full version that's got now 35 integrations in it. So let's just take a look. I'm going to go to this card flip. I enjoy that one. Each one of these has a nice demo mode. You can see what it's supposed to do. And this is actual FileMaker data. All of this is actual FileMaker data inside this demo. And all right, so we're going to go to the code and just hunt around here. I've got a tab called code, and it holds all of those fields. Here's the HTML field right here. And if I expand out one of the data or the other library fields, the other file fields, you see that the CSS is there. And again, I did this because this is what web developers do. They develop their code separate so that they can access only one part of it without having to disrupt the other part. And I think many designers can work on it. The designer can work on the CSS. The developer can work on the JavaScript and so forth. And I created this so that it's easy to navigate to one of those. So here's the CSS, and I can go right to the actual function that runs this, as well as the library, which is right here, that I found on the internet and downloaded into this site, this demo file. So this is set up like this, and it's very deliberate. I chose to download all of the code rather than linking up to a CDN somewhere, and instead just have it all here so that I can run it offline without the internet, and it works just fine. That's a great advantage because everything works perfectly in here. And if something gets updated in a CDN area, then it could somehow break my code possibly. So I'm just keeping it all locally stored. And then this HTML field works exactly like a regular web page. So in index.html, there's a bunch of links at the top and throughout the file, and I'm doing the same thing here. I've got a style tag with a placeholder, star star CSS 1 star star, and again, that's mimicking how web developers do it. And then I'm using FileMaker's calculation engine to work that out and to do all the substitutions, not that one, do all the substitutions for this integration. This field is actually unstored, and that's not necessarily a problem. All of these fields are coming from the same table, so it would be okay to keep it stored. But for now I've just got it unstored, and that's what's running all of this. And then there's a tab over here that shows the entire HTML code all together. So this is my choice for doing this. There are other people who might store the code in different text objects on the layout that are hidden or off the border. They might actually put it in the web viewer calculation, but I'm choosing to do it this way. That way I can just get to the CSS and I can focus on it right away. So that's part of the standardization. Let's see here. Let's go back here. Did that. Talked about that. And another thought in this is the standardization is how to use it in your custom app. Well, I'll get into some specifics about this, but each integration that needs data, like this find mechanism right here, those are actual field records in my table there. They all need the data to be stored, and so I have that in a field. And so these are some considerations that as you as a developer, as you're pushing this into your custom app, need to think about. Should that data field that holds the data from the records, from the table, should it be stored or should it be in a global something, whether a global variable or a field with global storage, so that it can be accessible by one or more users. In the dashboard example I will show you in a minute, all 40,000 records are stored so that everybody can see the same data. That's the choice that I make, but it may not be good for your particular situation. All the web languages fields should be stored as well, and these fields could be in a separate table or be part of a data table. So in my app, it's in an HTML table, and when I push it into a custom app that I've already built, I will keep that same structure and then just use that separate table. But you could conceivably put all of these data fields, these HTML integration fields, into the same table as, say, the people table, wherever it fits your structure and your setup. Consider the layout. How do you want to display this web viewer integration? A lot of these are full screen things like the calendar, which I'll show you in a minute. But some of them are also small little pieces, and you don't want to waste a whole layout and it look odd when it's that small of an object in the layout. So in this example, the picture here, I put it into a card window. It could be in a popover as well. So there's a lot of possibilities, and that comes to you as the designer to figure out where it's going to go. So let's just take a look at that as another example. For this one, for example, it's a full screen particular piece. And it allows you to see it in the full screen here. But if you go to somewhere else, like the countdown clock, you may not really want this in the whole screen. You may want to combine it into something else. All right, so let's keep on moving here. The data gathering process. This is vital to this. Many of these integrations require actual data from the FileMaker database. And so there's a lot of ways to just gather the data. In my file, I have a lot of scripts that gather the data, and you can easily copy those and see them. But it's up to you to consider how to gather the data. In my file, let's go to that data maps one. In my file, there's a notes section here that tells you down at the bottom here how to best gather the data. There's a script that I've developed that walks you through it, as well as how the data should be formatted. So whether you copy mine or not, that's fine. You can see how it should be collected. And then, of course, you can look at the data tab, the data field, and see exactly how it's located, or it's set up. For the calendar, I know we all love calendars. The data is pretty much almost a pure JSON object. It's not quite, because the keys here don't have quotes around them. And that's the weird thing about using an integration, is each one of them is a little bit different, and each one requires the data in a little bit different way. So you really have to study the documentation or study how mine is set up to know how it's supposed to be. All right, so let's see here. Data gathering is important. Use the new functions, the JSON functions if possible. There's a lot of date and time issues because we're in the US. FileMaker by default reads it one way, but all of the JavaScript libraries need it in the international format, or the year, month, day. So there's just some considerations with that. And then photos, the photo integration that I have is actually taking each photo, converting it to base 64, and then pushing that into the library in the correct way. So I'll just show you that quick. And all this stuff I've hopefully have worked out, so you don't have to rework it out. This is a cool little slider of photos, and here's my photo data. All right, so it shows you very clearly there how it's set up, and then the bunch of weird text is just the photo encoded into base 64. And again, hopefully, this tells you right down here how it should be set up. All right, and in this particular case, this field tells you that this integration needs a field in the photo table, that has the encoded stuff going on. And I actually haven't adjusted this since FileMaker 16 came out. There is a new version that, a new function here that doesn't put return characters after every so many characters. So I just haven't adjusted that yet, but this works just fine. So this works nicely and is part of what you have to think about when you're developing working with your integration. You can manipulate any of these integrations, and the point of this file was to make that very easy. I know barely any JavaScript or CSS, so I had to develop a way for this to be as easy as possible. So I can go into one of these. I'm going to go into the card flip again, and I'm going to change the color. I don't really like that green. It doesn't fit my custom app once I've pushed it in there. So I can change it by adjusting the CSS. Just a little note about this, couple helpful things. Back on the home page, up at the toolbox, there's if you don't know anything about web languages, I have a piece of document called, what is it called? A Quick Guide to the Web, that just downloads a PDF that I wrote up that describes the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript elements that are used in here, and just a basic primer of it. No way is it comprehensive, but I tried to pick elements out of this library that you could then easily see how it works by looking here. But of course, you can always go to the Source tab, and you can pull up W3 Schools. You can pull up the entire list of CSS properties and values. I used this extensively as I was working with this. So you can pull it up, and you can see how you would manipulate a certain part of your integration. So let's do that. Go to the code, and I'm going to go to the CSS. I'm going to change the color of the front. I don't like the green, so I'm going to change it to something. But I actually don't remember what element that is, because in HTML, everything is rendered in an element, in some sort of tag. So I'm going to take a look and see what that is. I'm going to quickly, oops, that's cool. I'm going to go to the data area, and I'm just going to study it for a second and see that the question here that helps me with the certification test is in a div with a class of front. So that's how I can go and identify it inside the CSS, that selector, and change the color. So I'm going to keep that front class in my head, and I'm going to go back to the CSS, and I'm going to try to scroll through and find that. CSS these are selectors in the CSS, and anything with a dot is a class element that you have defined in the HTML. So I want to look for something with the word front with that dot in front of it. And luckily, it's right there. So there we go. I can use these attributes to change how this green over here looks. So I'm going to do that. And I don't actually know a color to use. So I'm going to go back to the resources. I'm going to go to this hex color picker and just find a different color. Let's pick something nice, and I like that color. That's beautiful. Just simply copy it and go back to the library, and wherever that front is, I'm going to look for this attribute called background color and update it by pasting that in there. And as soon as I click out of the field, this is what I love about using the calculation model, and I love about it being in fields, because I can access it, I can manipulate it, and then I can see it update in a heartbeat. I don't have to go back into browse mode or do any weird things. I can see it update as I go. So this is my way of starting to manipulate it. So let's take a look and see, does that work? Yeah, I like that. That fits my colors of my new custom app. So I think that this would be useful. But actually, I would like to have some nice corners on it, some radius, some rounded corners. So I'm going to go back over to my CSS reference, and I believe there's I'm going to just do a find for radius. I think it's called radius. This is what I did all the time as I was putting this together. So, yep, I see a border radius property. So I'm going to just do this. I'm just going to copy this in here, copy this from there, and then add it to my CSS, selector front. Just put it at the bottom to be sure that I get it. And again, in a heartbeat, it updates. It's ready to go for my particular use. So if you're going to use this thing, this library, I suggest that you play with it in here first. Now, playing with it is good, but if something happens and you accidentally delete it all, you're kind of messed up. And I did this a lot and had to revert to many backups, and then someone in my company suggested build a reset button. So I've got a reset button here that resets it all back to what it was at its default. And if I find something that I like, so I really like those corners, I'm going to put that back in here. I really like those corners, so I'm going to add those back in, make sure it does, oh, it didn't do that. Let's go back. Did I put it in the right place? Here, I'm gonna reset it again. See, it's a good thing I've got the reset button. And go back to the front. I put it right after here last time, so let's see. That work? Oh, do I got to click out? What did I do wrong? Oh, I know why. Because I copied everything. I didn't need to do that. Here. Well, I'll just tell you this. If you find something you like, simply save it as your defaults. All right, so I'm going to go back and change it to that blue, because I want to show you that this is the good part about this. Change it to the blue. Background color, boom. There we go. And now I like this, so I'm going to set this as my defaults. And now that's stored in the database so that if you ever lose that code again, you can always come back to that. All right. So that's the basics of how you manipulate the style of an integration. If we want to manipulate the function of the integration, we've got to do a little bit more. We've got to get a little bit more messy. We've got to get down into the weeds a little bit. All of the web pages use JavaScript for their functionality. So we're going to end up going into the JavaScript, and we're going to make some changes there. So again, barely know any JavaScript, know barely any of this stuff. So I'm going to actually rely on the source to just examine the documentation to see what options I have to manipulate the function of these cards. So as I scroll through here, there's a how to use, oh, and then there's an options section, and every single documentation has this, so you can look for exactly what you're looking for. And I notice here that I can change the axis attribute and adjust the axis upon which it rotates. So that's really cool because if I don't want it to rotate around the y-axis, which it's doing right now, I want it to flip, then I want to change that. So I'm going to choose the X. I'm going to just look at some other ones here. Or yeah, I'm going to choose the X. I can change the trigger too. So instead of clicking on it to get it to flip, I can choose to make it hover, or when I hover over it, make it flip. I can change the speed. The default, it looks like it's 500, which is in milliseconds, so that's half of a second. So if I want to change the speed, I can do that. So I'm going to just make those quick changes here. Go into the JavaScript. Now, in every one of my integrations, I have JS1, JS2, and I also have a function field. This function field is where you're going to make any adjustments. The top two fields here are just the actual library itself. And you shouldn't really adjust that because that's what the developer has worked out perfectly. This function field is actually, it's basically like a parent script in FileMaker, if you know FileMaker at all, that calls certain functions in that library. So we don't want to mess with those fields in the code. We want to mess with this one. So I'm just going to go around in here, and I think it's telling me, let's see, somewhere it usually tells me where to be able to manipulate this. And this is the fun stuff, and it's also the maddening stuff. This is where you can lose a lot of work, so be sure you save backups of this all the time. I just know that I need to adjust it here. Most every function, every library has a base function, and then it has a bunch of options in it. And I see that axis is here and trigger is here. So I'm going to actually use those, and I'm going to adjust this from the y-axis, which, let's just review our memory, looks like this, to the x-axis, x. And now if I click on it, it immediately updates, it rotates differently for me. I don't want the hover, I want it to hover now, so I think that's kind of cool. So I'm going to change this trigger from click to hover. And I see now that it works just beautifully as I want it. If ever you do something and it suddenly breaks, you'll know it, right? Like I typed in just random characters. And there are many ways to work with this. We don't have a debugger in FileMaker for JavaScript yet, so I've been just going out to a browser and testing it there and right-clicking on it, inspecting it, and going to the console and see if it gives me any errors, like what's going on and why you have a extra curly brace or something. So this has been very helpful in debugging it so that I can get it right. In this case, I think it just didn't understand this option, so it just ignored it, and it's not going to flip it. So I'm going to go back to hover, and I'm going to change the speed to, let's see, 500 milliseconds is half a second. So I'm going to do 3,000 just for the fun of it and just see what that does. So that's kind of cool. So yeah, so there we go. So that's how you would manipulate an integration. All right. There's a lot in there, and that's why this file is built, so you can just play with it and just manipulate the heck out of it and do as much as you want with it. All right. We'll come back to some of those when we have time here. Let's go back to the next part. Documentation is very important. You got to read through it. You got to see what you can do with it, and then you just got to test it out. Calling back to FileMaker, this is the most fun part of this, other than the cool integrations that you get, the cool options, animations you get, is the ability to call back to FileMaker and have it do something because you clicked on something. And it's totally vague, but I'll show that in a minute. It's called the FMP protocol, and it's a great piece of FileMaker that does this, that works with the web viewer, and I think it actually works with a web page as well. It can call to the application FileMaker, and it can do something there. It can actually run a script. It's got a specific syntax, and I'll show you that in a minute. It took me a long time to work out the syntax, so I finally just copied it into this library, and I can just paste it wherever I need it, and I'll show you that in a minute. The FMP protocol is called in the HTML or in the CSS specifically. So in that function that would flip the card, I also have a little line of code that calls back to FileMaker and tells it to do something. Again, there's documentation found in the source tab. Tony White has a great infographic on it that you can download and paste to your wall. I actually did that for many years. And callback function in the JavaScript. Oh yeah, so in JavaScript there's a lot of functions, and some of them are specifically called callbacks because they call back, they do something, and we're going to take advantage of that, be specific of that in a minute. Just know that the FMP protocol is off by default in FileMaker 16, so if you've been clicking on things and it hasn't been working in 16, has that happened to anybody during this session? Just a few? Okay, we have to go in and enable an extended privilege, so I'll do that here. It's part of the security. It's part of what we heard yesterday, I think, making FileMaker more secure by default. So I'm going to go up into Manage Database, and this is probably, okay, good. It's not, no, I don't want to go to Manage Database. I want to go to Manage Security. All right, so it does need a password, so it's just admin. That will get you in to the Managed Security area. Everybody write that down, admin. And we're going to go to the extended privileges in FileMaker 16. Actually, we're going to go to the privilege sets for the full access. I'm a full access account, but even for full access account, this right here, this function is, or this extended privilege is off by default. Is off by default. So we need to just turn it on. Where is it? Right there. We need to allow URLs to perform FileMaker scripts, FMURL script. So just make sure that's on in your version of it if it's not already. All right, cancel that out. All right, so the FMP protocol looks like this. For this card flip, I actually don't have it. I'm going to reset that because that's driving me nuts. There we go. It's faster. Okay. So in my case, I set this up again to study certification questions. So I have it set so that I can read the question, I can study it, I can look at the answer. If I get it correct, then I click on that button and the question disappears and it goes away. Now that's really cool here, but the concern is what would happen if I were to come back to this, this page later. Well, I set it up, I wrote a script that actually marks that question as true or as correct, and then it will hide it. So every time this regenerates, that question is excluded from my list here. And that needed the FMP protocol. In the notes section, there's a quick little area that describes what script I'm using in the FMP protocol, and it gives you a description. And this is actually important because this piece of text, this word question check, is actually part of what I'm doing calculations on and what I'm substituting. So if you see here, I've got a placeholder text called script name, and it's actually grabbing the name of that script in that field that I just showed you, and it's putting it in here. Okay, so as you push it to your own custom app, you'll need to reconcile that, and some descriptions are in there to help you see that. All right, so let's see here. We've got that. So let's go into the code and see where that's at. So it's on that correct button. So I'm going to go to that correct button in the data and just see where that's listed. So let's see. I got to scroll through this a little bit. Actually, you know what? It isn't in here. Sorry. It is in the function. Kind of got to hunt around for it. Right here. Okay. So there's a class called results. That button, that pink button, has the class result attached to it. And this JavaScript is looking for what happens, it's looking for when the user clicks on something with that class of result. So every one of those buttons has that class attached to it. And every single one of those buttons will run this function right here. And here's what it does. It grabs the ID, and this, you don't have to worry about any of this, I just want to explain it a little bit. It grabs the ID of the question that we're on, which is in that data field, and it sets it to some variables, and then it runs this. This is the magic part of it. I set a variable called do this to this syntax, which is the FMP protocol. The FMP protocol normally needs the file name in here, but you can see that I have a placeholder text in there, and it gets substituted out with that with HTML field. I've also got a script placeholder that is substituted out for the script name, in this case question check. And then I'm passing a parameter to the FMP protocol to the script, like we would do at the bottom of the script dialog. I'm passing the ID of this. So and then this is essential here. Window.location, do this. Again, it's kind of magic. I don't fully understand it. Just discovered it with the help from a colleague, and it works. So I just go with it. I'm not an expert in the JavaScript part, so sorry about that. So let's just debug it and see what happens. So if I click on this, it's running that script called question check, because that JavaScript function was listening for when somebody clicks on a item with the class of result. So it runs this, it grabs the parameter, and it's going to just generate a new window quick. It's going to find that question with that ID, and then it's going to mark it as correct. Okay, so it marks it as correct. We can see that right here. It marked it as correct. We close the window. And then the JavaScript is able to finish its process by making the cool fade out of the square of the card. And then when this is run again, that question will not be put in here, will not be put into the data field, because that one has been marked correct. It's still there. You can see it still here, but because the JavaScript, I haven't done anything with this yet, it's actually invisible as far as the web viewer is concerned. If I go away, I don't know if this will work. We'll see what happens. If I go away and then I come back, yeah, it is there. So I just haven't set this up to, when you go to this layout, rerun the gathering script, which is called gather data for card flip. That just would need to be rerun every time I come back to this web viewer's page. So that's using the FMP protocol. Because I don't know the syntax very well, I do have a place that you can get it. It's right here. Just simply copy and paste it, or copy it there, and then you can paste it inside code wherever it needs to go. And this comes with all those other ones. This is only useful if you're actually creating a new integration, which we're not going to be able to get into today. But this has been useful to me as I've created these. All right, so that's the FMP protocol. There's probably a lot more to do with that, but that's the basics of it. Now, a word about this. In WebDirect, the FMP protocol doesn't work. So we can't use this cool calling back to FileMaker in WebDirect. And that's just how it is. So there are workarounds. Yes?
I figured out a good workaround. Use CWP for it.
Exactly. Yep, that's the workaround, which I know nothing about and is on the list of things to learn. So yes, but that is the standard workaround, to somehow call CWP, which calls FileMaker, which then does all of its things. So that's one consideration. Speaking of WebDirect, very quickly, these, I found out, like I said at the very end, don't work very well in WebDirect. And I was freaking out about that, so I put a disclaimer, only for FileMaker Go and Pro. So I covered myself right there. But then we decided to explore it some more, and so a colleague, Mike Duncan, actually came up with this. He discovered this idea. And basically what this is doing is, this is a calculation inside the web viewer. It's saying, if you detect that we're on the web with the get application version, then go ahead and base64 encode all of that HTML, all of that stuff together, the calc field, and then render it on here. And you see some prefixes over there. Otherwise, just use the standard web viewer syntax right there. So this works really well. It does work better, very much better in WebDirect. It's just that dang FMP protocol that is unfortunate, but that's how it is. What this right up here? It encodes the HTML calc field that does all the substitution into base64, and then it displays that on here. Because the source here is base64 instead of just plain old HTML, the web viewer can render it, decode it, and render it exactly as it's supposed to. But we only want that to happen on the WebDirect because there is a little bit of a delay, right? It has to encode it, then it has to decode it. But again, you don't have to worry about that. If you copy this, it should work pretty much just fine. All right. So that's the basics of the FMP protocol, and many of these do that. The calendar, for example. And the calendar is actually a pretty complicated one. There's a lot of stuff going on here. I'll just briefly review this. I got a few minutes left. It's very simple. I can click on one of these, open it up. I can actually edit the appointment, say instead of 90 minutes, do 120 minutes, and it updates on here. You do get that flash. You do get the reloading. I don't know if there's a way to do this. It's just going to reload. Maybe there is. I've also enabled the functionality where I can drag and drop this. So that's really cool because in FileMaker this would take a lot of work to do, but I can drag and drop this, and as I finish that, you see the flash because it's run a script using the FMP protocol that then updates the times to match what I dropped it on in the calendar. And I can even adjust it. So it's 9:30 to 10:30 or 11, whatever. I'm going to change it for 15 minutes, and you can see that it's been adjusted inside FileMaker in the data, in the table. And of course, I could drag it and put it somewhere else. And it does, with that flash, it does update it as it's needed. So that's pretty cool. Yes? It is a FileMaker pop-up. Yep. That's how I developed it first. There are integrations that will pop up inside the web viewer using its code, but it chose not to in this. So this is probably the most complicated. There's at least 3 different scripts that are running. They're actually the same script, but with different parameters saying, you know, adjust or move or whatever. So you can explore that. All right, so the last part of this, I think, let's just take a look at it, is pushing an integration. These are fine to play with, but if they're stuck in this library, they're no good to you, right? So I tried to make a way for you to be able to push this in as quick as possible. Because I chose to put everything in fields, we all know that we can export fields, so we can export this data. And we have basically 3 steps to do, and I'll demonstrate that here. We export the code, and then we copy the calculation field, and then we paste the calculation field inside our new app, and we're set. So I'm gonna just demonstrate that here. Try to do this in real time. I have a people table somewhere. I have a people table. It's pretty simple, just a list view of people. It's got a couple fields in it. And I'm going to set up this cool integration called Type Ahead, because I really like this. I think it's a nice, quick way to find a particular person. So if I type in David Copperfield, I get a bunch of Davids, and I can click on one of them, and I can go to that using the FMP protocol and a script that I wrote. So I'm going to bring that into this custom app, because this is for my client. I need it to look nice. I want to build this functionality. So we'll see if we can do this in about 5 minutes or less. So I'm going to hit export. I'm going to go really fast on this, so buckle up. There's a lot of text here that explains you walk through. I'm going to skip all that and just hit the highlights. First of all, I'm going to export the code. Pretty simple. It adds an HTML file onto my desktop, which contains all the code. I can open it up, and I can see it all there. I can see all the code, the JavaScript, the CSS. I can even see the data. So this one contained Fred Flintstone, all these people. That came from my library because I want you to be able to see it working before you hook it up to your actual data. So we've got that in there. That's great. Now we simply, we're going to import this. The next step is to just import it into our custom app. So I'll go to my contacts. I'm going to hit Import Records, File. I'm going to find that. FileMaker Pro, it's a FileMaker file. Do that. Put it into a new table. And boom, it's all in there. All the code is in there. The only thing I need to do now with my library is copy the calculation text. So I've got it here written out. Simply copy it. It's put in my clipboard. Go into my custom app. Create a new field called HTML calc. Make it a calculation field. Do that. Change it to text. And in my custom app, I pretty much have the integration set up. So if I go and I create a web viewer object just as a test, and I simply direct it to hit that calculation field right there. See that? Should do that over here. There we go. Then I am set. Let's see. Boom, boom, boom. Boom. Oops, did that. Don't want that. There we go. So now I've got it set up, and I can still type in David, and I've got all of those people there. Now, obviously, if I click on this, it's going to break because, number one, that access privileges issue. And I don't actually have this script written in here. I've got to write this script. So let's go do those things quickly. Should have done this one before, but that's all right. This is the fun of live demos. There we go. Boom. Do that, do that. Now I'm just going to test it out. All right, good. So now it can run, but it's just saying, hey, there's a script that's been deleted. So I'm going to simply copy this script name here, which is what I copied it. And I'm going to create a new script. Create a new script called that. And just because I want to get to something else, I'm going to just say show custom dialog. And then get script parameter, okay? So I've got that. We're just going to do this quick instead of doing a find. I trust you all can figure out how to do a find and actually find that record, but that's what I would use it for. So if I do David Copperfield, boom, it's passing the name of the person that I chose in that dropdown, and it's throwing it up on a custom dialog. If I do something else, like I'm going to just start typing in things, Fred Flintstone, there it is, just like that. So you can see that this can then be applied. So I've got that. Now I'm going to actually take this and I'm going to add it to my contacts list. So let's see here. I want to actually use this data. So what I would do, and I'm going to stop here because I want to get to some extensions, but I would simply write another script called gather people type ahead. I would look at that in here, type ahead. And I would pretty much copy this script and develop this in my app for my data. So instead of going to it's the subscript here. Instead of going to the people table in my library, I'm going to that contacts field table in my custom app. So again, you can do all this. Down here, very briefly, is where I'm setting it up to be exactly what I want. I want a single quotation. I want the first name, a space, and a last name, or just the full name. Again, there could be a full name field. And I'm just generating a list of that. I'm then taking it into, and then I just finish this by setting whatever I collected here inside that data field. So again, I can't do that with 2 minutes left. But that's what I would do. I would gather all the contacts out of this file, and I would push them into this data field right here, and then they would be available on in my type ahead functionality. Does that make sense? Sorry, I couldn't finish it completely, but I think you see where it could go from here. Okay, so within less than 5 minutes, but I didn't get complete. So let's round it up to 30 minutes. You can pretty much push one of these integrations into your custom app. Now, as an extension, I just want to show you what more you can do with this. I love this. I love all of the integrations in here, but I recently developed this for a client. This is that dashboard I was telling you about that actually handles 40,000 records, and it loaded that fast. Of course, this is local for sure. But it does handle it. And the thing that I love about this library is so it's showing a history. It's showing 40,892 records worth $5 million, almost $6 million. If I click on one of these and I say I want to look at George's sales, I can click on it and everything else adjusts. So this was a really cool integration that I found. It's called Cross Filter. It's DC. It's got D3 in it. There's a lot of stuff in here. So it took a while to figure out, but this is what you can do with it when you've got this concept down. And another very cool one that I discovered too was taking this ugly data of 3,000 sales records, formatting it correctly, and then turning it into something we all cherish and love, a pivot table, right? This is pretty cool. And I didn't do anything except for collect the data in that format. And this particular library has a ton of different features. I can adjust these and say, I don't want the year, I just want to be grouped by month. There's no extra work for me to do other than let the JavaScript library do its thing. So thank you. So this pivot table is not yet on the session materials. I will make it available. It's free. I found it somewhere. I found the JavaScript code somewhere. So as soon as I clean it up a little bit, I'll make it available, and then you can have a pivot table without doing a whole lot of work, and that's great. This actually comes with the D3 library in it, integrated, so I can do a line chart with the data. I can actually get rid of some months if I wanted to. And I love this. I found this late in the game, but it also comes with an export feature. This is just a CSV. I can copy this and paste it right into Excel, and I don't have to do any special work with this. So this is pretty awesome. This is the power of using an integration in FileMaker with FileMaker data, and I think it's pretty easy. So there we go. Phew, that was it. Thank you very much. We are right at the end, so if you have any questions, I'd love to talk to you. I'll be at the Visionary Bar at 3:45, so feel free to say hi there too. Download all of them and check out my blogs. I have a lot of detail about these as well. Thank you.